Welcome back to Weems Motor Co. Let's find out what's inside this box. Stick around. So I've had this box kicking around in my storage unit for at least a couple years. And we've gotten to a place on our Born Free 16 build where we're waiting for parts to come back, but something more special has come up in the meantime. There is a race in September at Loretta Lynn's Ranch in Tennessee titled the Hooligan 100. Now, this is said to be the East Coast version of the Biltwell 100 that we did a couple years ago on our 1956 Desert Sled. But I thought, that motorcycle needs a little bit of work, as you've seen in the videos, and that's plan A to bring that bike, but it's always good to have a plan B. You don't want to rely on plan B, but it's nice to have a plan B. And inside this box is plan B. So without further ado, let's see what's inside here. Yes, a Triumph Cub engine. Now, I'm gonna have to admit something. I've never built one of these, never worked on one, never even ridden one, but I've had this 1967 Triumph Mountain Cub, numbers matching, sitting in my storage unit for a few years. And I said, well, maybe I got enough to get everything put together. Now, when I bought this bike, it was completely disassembled, and that's typically how you would not buy a motorcycle, because you don't know what's there, what's not, what's been damaged. You gotta go through, it's a lot of work. But I do, on the back porch, have a 1968 Triumph Cub. That's, the engine's all complete together in a number matching frame, but it's missing all the other stuff. So I think between this and that on the back porch, I could probably put together an engine. And that's the goal, is if I can get an engine together. The frame for this bike is in pretty decent shape. Just needs to be cleaned up, new tires, maybe some new seals and stuff like that in the forks, but I think we can make it happen. So we're gonna go through, start inspecting these items and figure out what's here, what's not. And to do that, we're gonna have to grab a schematic and a repair manual. So we're just gonna print some up on the computer real quick and go grab them, and let's find out what's here. Let's do it. So you would be surprised what you can find on the internet for free. We have both the repair manual and the parts numbers book that we can use to figure out if we got everything here. And once we know that we have everything here and it's usable, how we can put it back together. So we're gonna go through systematically, look at each schematic, pull out the parts, set them to the side, and make sure we got everything there. So let's start digging through parts. So it appears that everything is here, everything is dirty, everything needs to get cleaned. So that's the next step in this process, to get these engine cases cleaned up. But a positive note, it looks like this crankshaft was either new old stock or freshly rebuilt. So that is one less thing for me to worry about, because those flywheels on there have to be balanced and everything like that. We are gonna check that before we throw it together, but it's nice to know that it's got a new bearings and everything in there for the rod. So get all this stuff cleaned up, and let's see if we can start maybe putting together a 1967 Triumph Cub engine. So let's clean it up. Did you see that? The bearing just fell out on its own. That's what happens when aluminum expands and steel takes a little bit longer to expand. So just fell right out. Super cool. Maybe that'll help us when it comes to getting this one out for the crankshaft. Let's get back to work. All right, here comes that third one. Let's get this thing super hot. Flip it over, make sure we're using gloves so we don't burn ourselves. Let's see if we can get this thing out. Worked like a charm. Not too bad. Now, while we're letting that cool down, we're gonna run over, grab some hardware, the bolts and stuff, throw them up on the wire wheel, clean those up. So we'll catch you guys in a second. All right, now that we got all of our bolts and pieces and parts all wire wheeled and cleaned up, we gotta go back into our cases and make sure where those bolts go, that those holes are actually all cleaned out. While doing that, I was able to discover that all of these threads in here are the original threads, which is awesome because when I work on the old pre-unit 650 Triumph engines, most of the time people have went back in and retapped those holes so they can use standard bolts. Now, standard bolts is like you know, like what you could find at your hardware store. Well, these old British bikes, especially before 1968, used Whitworth threading and standard Whitworth or British size bearings and stuff. That's something we noticed right away was these bearings are actually metric bearings, which is easy to find, but it's odd that they would be in these. And I did the research and yes, for some reason, Triumph Cubs use metric bearings. But the threads on these are not the standard threading like you would find on a 650. These are actually British standard fine threads, which is kind of close to Whitworth. It's just a different thread pitch. That's the angle at which those little lines inside the holes go. But they still use a Whitworth head. Now, we've talked about Whitworth a few times before, but I wanted to show you an example. So, for instance, this bolt right here, this is the bolt that holds the two engine halves together. So once we put the crankshaft in, there are like 8 of these bolts and they squeeze those cases together and hold that crankshaft in. Now this is a 1/4 inch Whitworth bolt. Now, when you're talking about Whitworths, it's not like the standard bolt thread. So if you were to say a 1/4 inch bolt, well, that's talking about using a 1/4 inch wrench. Now this is a 1/4 inch standard wrench. You can see how small that is. And this is a 1/4 inch Whitworth bolt. That 1/4 inch wrench will not fit on the head of that 1/4 inch bolt. You have to use a 1/4 inch Whitworth, which is quite a bit bigger than the 1/4 inch standard. So this Whitworth wrench will work on the head of that Whitworth bolt. So the question always comes up, well, why do they call that 1/4 inch then? They base it off of the size of the threaded portion, not the head. With American standard, they use the head and not the bolt portion, the threaded portion. So that's a piece of advice for you guys. So now we have to go order some parts. We need some piston rings. Luckily the cylinder was in really good shape. We just need a set of rings. A couple little small parts and pieces, so I need to go get those ordered. But while we're ordering those, I'm gonna go ahead and run a tap through all of those threaded holes in there. So we'll catch you guys back in a second. Hang out. All right, so I went ahead and took an extra day and got everything cleaned up. I had to make a trip over to St. Petersburg to visit my friend, the vintage bike builder, Rick Carr over there. And I said, I'm already going, why not bring some parts and throw them in the vapor home? So we got everything super clean. Now I said this is a rebuild, not a restoration. Now it's kind of leaning towards a restoration because of how clean everything is, but we're just gonna continue rebuilding. Went ahead and put some ceramic coating onto the cylinder and got that baked on, everything good to go there. But I did want to take a moment and share with you guys how to get things polished up. Now, didn't look like this when we started. Matter of fact, I left the other one so I can show you guys. This is pretty much the standard that it was, all the scratches, nicks and everything. So I'm going to show you really quickly how I get a factory style finish onto these covers. Now, this is factory. Show would be like a mirror, but this is how they came from the factory. Kind of shiny, but not like a mirror. But let's grab this timing cover and get it over to the table and talk about the process. So if you've been around Weems Motor Co. for more than a day and watch our stuff, you probably are already aware of sandpaper grits. Now, the way it works is if the number is small, that's more aggressive. So case in point, this is a 180 grit DA pad. That's 180 grits. And if you have, let's say, an 80 grit or a 60 grit, it's just more coarse. It's gonna do more scratching and remove more material. Well, with this cover, we do have some gouges and things and some scratches and stuff, so we need to remove those, but I don't want to go too aggressively with it. I don't want to do that 60-80 grit. We're going to start off with a 180. And basically this 180 should remove a majority of these scratches. After that, we need to remove the scratches that the 180 leaves, so we jump up to a 240. The 240 is going to smooth it and blend it even more. And then on this particular application, we're gonna stop at a 320 grit. Now, like I said, this is like a factory finish. It's not that show quality finish. If you're looking for a show quality finish, then you're gonna jump up to like a 600 grit, 800 grit, 1000 grit. And some people get crazy and go to like 2000 grit wet sanding, but for this particular application, we're gonna go up to that 320 grit, and then we're gonna take it over to the buffer using some white compound that's good for soft materials like aluminum and brass and stuff like that. And then we will buff this out, and it's gonna have a nice, clean, smooth finish to it. So without further ado, let's get to sanding. And nice and smooth all the way down, removed a majority of those scratches. Now, like we said, if you want to take this to a show quality finish, you would keep going 600, 800, 1000, 1200, 2000, whatever. But we are just getting this back to a nice factory style finish. So all those big scratches removed out of there, got a nice uniform surface. Now we can jump onto the buffer and use our white polishing compound and get this thing shining. So let's get to buffing. All right, got it all buffed up, and we still have all that polishing compound on there. You can see as you wipe it away how shiny that's gonna be. But we're gonna take some terry cloth, wipe all that polishing compound off, and then we're gonna go ahead and use this product that I love. It's called Weems. It kind of puts a wax covering as it polishes the aluminum out. Once again, doing that with a terry cloth, and then that will be all we have to do for polishing, and we can get ready to assemble this 1967 Triumph Mountain Cub engine. So let's get this wiped down. And there we have it. Two side covers all nice and polished up. Everything's nice and clean. Now we can get to the assembly phase of this process. Let's get to work. Well, it is a couple days later, and as you can tell with the Born Free project, we have a lot more parts on the table, which means we have a lot of work to do, and somehow we got ourselves wrapped up in the middle of building that Cub engine. So what I'm gonna do today, I'm going to build this Triumph Cub engine now that we have all the parts in hand so that we can get to work on the important project. So let's get this thing knocked out. I'm not gonna take a lot of your time sitting here talking to a camera because I need to get into these manuals and figure out how to do this. Now, there is a great series on YouTube by probably one of my favorite YouTubers out there, a gentleman by the name of Paul Brody. He does a complete restoration on a Triumph Cub that he has, and it's probably one of my favorite series to watch online. But Paul does all kinds of stuff. He was originally a bicycle builder back in the day, but he does motorcycles nowadays. So if you are looking for some other content similar to what we do, maybe with somebody who is more talented than me, go check out Paul Brody's channel over on YouTube. So let's learn these manuals. Let's get this engine built so that we can get on the important stuff. Let's get to work. All right, it's the next day. Well, more than the next day. Let's have a moment of complete honesty here. We were getting the shop all cleaned and cleared so that we could do some work on our Born Free bike. And in that process, I may have thrown away a couple really important parts for this Cub engine. So we had to order some online. So in all reality, it is not the next day, it's a few days later. We did some work on our Born Free bike. That's why we have it covered up. You'll be seeing that in an upcoming episode. Make sure you're following that build series for that. But I threw away the circlips for the piston to go on our Cub engine. Man, talk about the wrong time to get rid of something. Luckily we were able to jump online and order some, got those within a couple days, so that now we can get back to work on our 1967 Mountain Cub engine. Only thing left to do on this is to put the top end on, and it can be a little frustrating from what I hear from other guys, but I believe I can do it. I've watched Paul Brody's YouTube video and he does a good job at doing this. So Paul, if you're watching this, hey, hit us up. Let us know how we're doing. All the rest of you guys watching this video, jump down in the comments and let us know how we're doing with this. But without further ado, let's get back to work on this 1967 Triumph Cub. So on those couple days off, I went ahead and took the time to assemble the head, lap these valves, and got everything assembled with the rockers and everything ready to put this thing back together. Now, can be the tricky part from what I've heard from everyone, as these push rods are not in direct alignment with the rockers that's inside of the head. Matter of fact, here are the push rods, and as they come out of the engine, they actually cross so that they can run parallel. Not looking forward to this, but I did watch Mr. Brody's video and kind of got a couple pointers from him. But another thing to note is the manuals are very vague on these, the rebuild manuals from the factory. There are no torque specs, there is no torque sequence. Everything that I'm applying to this engine is kind of what I've done with the unit construction and pre-unit 650s and 500s. But I know these are 5/16 bolts, which typically on a head on a 650 Triumph, the 5/16 bolts, you would torque those down to 15 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go off of that. We went ahead and annealed all of our copper gaskets, and not only the head gasket, but also all the other ones that go along the engine. So we knocked all that out while we were waiting, but without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. All right, last thing to do before we button up this 1967 Triumph Mountain Cub is to set the valve clearance. Everything in the manual that I've seen for this says 10 thousandths on the intake and exhaust, which seems kind of excessive to me, but never built one of these engines, so I'm gonna go ahead and set them to 10 thousandths each. Then we could throw the carburetor on and we could be wrapped up on this Cub engine. So let's do this and knock it out. And there we have it, a 1967 Triumph Mountain Cub engine all buttoned up. Great timing for us to get back onto our Born Free 16 bike. Super stoked to get this knocked out. Now we just got to get over to the storage unit, pull the bike out, and clean up and restore the rest of it. Man, that's a lot of work. But I think that's gonna wrap up our video today. We thank you guys for hanging out. If you are new around here, jump down and hit that subscribe button. If you really like the video, hit that thumbs up, turn those notifications on, and let everyone know what's going on right here at Weems Motor Co. Peace.